Hi again. This is type 1 diabetes sentenced to life, the reality of living with type 1 diabetes. As you can see, there's the rocking surfboard chair. I think that's going to be my signature uh, background, signature to this channel. Today, what I thought I'd better do is, although this is the reality of type 1 diabetes and all the things that go into living with that. I'm going to share all kinds of information and just the day in the life, what it really is like with my past 33 years experience living with it. Today, though, this short video is to give some information, education, if you will, background on what is diabetes, what is type 1 diabetes, and some of the physiology of how the human body works in relation to blood sugar, insulin, and diabetes. So, general information for you to kind of get a baseline. I figure I have to do this so that you can get a better picture of what the real life of dealing with this is. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about giving definition of what is diabetes. Well, the full name is diabetes mellitus. Mellitus. It's pronounced differently, but diabetes mellitus is the full name, and it means excess sugar in the blood. Now, there's actually another type of diabetes which is called, or which is named, diabetes insipidus, which is excess water in the blood. So there's a little trivia for you about diabetes and the different types. We're obviously talking about diabetes mellitus, sugar in the blood. Now, diabetes mellitus is currently diagnosed in approximately 37 million people in the United States. And there are about four, not about, there are four main categories of diabetes mellitus. There's type 1, type 2, gestational, and prediabetes. Type 1 is what we're primarily talking about, which is what I have and which is what this whole channel is dedicated to, is only about 5% of all the population of diabetic patients. So somewhat rare. Type 1 patients, type 1 diabetes patients, our bodies do not produce the hormone insulin. And I'll talk about this in the physiology a little bit later. Type 2 diabetes, which is the majority of diabetes patients, what you hear of on the TV commercials and in just general information in the US, their bodies, those patients, their bodies produce insulin. However, either not enough for what's required of their for bodily function and activity, or their body simply doesn't use the insulin well enough. So that's type 2. Gestational, that is the type of diabetes involved with uh, women during pregnancy. It's a temporary situation most of the time. It's where they have high blood sugars during pregnancy, during the time of pregnancy. And now there's this fourth category that's come up with prediabetes. This is a new one, and it's primarily patients who have high blood sugars, however, not extremely high, in relation to some other health problems or health situations that they have. So it's one of those situations where they're on the borderline of being diagnosed, however, uh, they are at the point where modifications in their health and lifestyle can prevent it. Now, as I said, there are 37 million people who have uh, diabetes. 5% primarily are type 1. The type 2 diabetes, kind of lumped into a category, and I'll talk straightforward on this, are mostly the adult patients who are overweight, inactive, have multiple other health problems. Their bodies simply are just not efficient in using insulin or utilizing the fuel, the carbohydrates in their system. Now, the way they diagnose diabetes is primarily with lab tests of the blood. During these or in these lab tests, they're looking at glucose levels, sugar levels in the blood. Now, normal readings for people who do not have diabetes, the blood sugar levels are usually at the number of 115 and below. Now, I believe it's megaliters per or microliters per gram. You can look it up, but the number, and that's what everybody goes by. It's like telling temperature. Primarily, it's the temperature outside is 80 degrees. 80 degrees what? Fahrenheit? Yeah. So we just know, oh, it's 85. Same thing with blood sugars. Oh, my number's 115. That's the thing to key in on. Now, borderline, where some of these pre-diabetic conditions are diagnosed, is roughly 120 to 140. Again, you can verify these numbers with the American Diabetes Association, Mayo Clinic, National Health System, Center for Disease Control, those kind of things. There is also a test that you might have heard of called the A1C level. And I mention that because you probably heard of it. There's all these TV commercials now, or commercials on TV. Most commercials have to do with either cars, food, or medications. Of the medications, a lot of them now are dealing with type 2 diabetes patients. And they're all the song and dance and dancing. I've got my A1C lower, all this business. A1C is a blood test that shows what your blood sugar level average has been, or percent of blood sugar in your in parts of your blood cells over the past 3 months. So it's an average, and specifically, it's the amount or percentage of glucose that's on hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the part of a blood cell that carries oxygen. And hemoglobin is actually coated, has a sugar coating. Well, they test this percentage of how much sugar coating is on that hemoglobin over the past 3 month average, over the past 3 months average time. So these averages show what your blood sugar levels are. And I'll show some charts that have, in fact, correlations between blood sugar levels and your A1C levels. But you'll see all these medications on TV now are dealing with A1C levels. I've got my A1C level down. You'll also notice on those medications that they're for type 2 diabetes patients, because medications help lower blood sugar, but they're not for type 1 diabetes patients, because type 1 diabetes patients are not producing insulin. And you need insulin to transport glucose or blood sugar into the cells so they can be burned as fuel. Again, type 2 patients are producing insulin. Their bodies are not utilizing that insulin, or it's not transporting the sugars as efficient enough. So there's medications. There's Ozempic, Rybelsus, all these medications. And I'll do another video that goes into the details and why you've heard a lot about those medications lately. So again, that's primarily how they diagnose diabetes, especially type 1. Now, signs and symptoms of the onset of type 1 diabetes are extreme thirst, frequent urination, loss of weight, some headaches and sweating, but those are ideal, significant signs of high blood sugar. Frequent urination, extreme thirst, even some hunger, but sickness, loss of weight. Now, I mentioned carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, let's keep it simple, equals sugar. Okay? Everybody, whether you have diabetes or not, requires sugar, carbohydrates, for the body to function, for all cells to function. So carbohydrates are basic nutrition of, or a basic part of nutrition, which is your fuel for life. Everything we eat and drink primarily has carbohydrates. Next time you go to, well, in your kitchen, in the cabinet, look at the food label and look under carbohydrates. Everything has an amount of carbohydrates except water, celery, lettuce. You get the idea. Things that mostly are water or don't have any sugars, any carbohydrates in. Other than that, everything does. And isn't it ironic? Everything has carbohydrates, and that's what we need to have in our system for fuel. So it is important, carbohydrates in our nutrition for fuel. Now, the human body actually has not only the carbohydrates, the sugar circulating in the blood, but there's storage of carbohydrates, of sugar in our liver and in our muscles. And when our body starts to run low on sugar, our liver releases some of this stored blood sugar into the blood system and goes to the different parts of the body that need it for energy. When we first initiate any exercise or activity, the blood sugar that is used for that energy actually comes from muscle. Muscles store blood sugar as well. So, insulin is produced in the pancreas. Almost couldn't spit that out. In the pancreas, that's an organ in the human body. Insulin is produced there. That insulin, again, is like the key to open the door to get the blood sugar in the cell and that blood sugar to be used by fuel. Again, the pancreas produces this. Type 1 diabetic, our pancreas is not producing this insulin. So the blood sugar, our fuel, can't get into the cells or into the fuel tank of that body part to be used. So that excess sugar, that sugar that's not getting into the cells, gets built up into the bloodstream. And if you think about it, that extra blood sugar, glucose, think of it like this. Think of it as a real solid object that's got sharp points on it. The actual molecule of sugar actually has sharp points to it. And if you think about it, if you've got all these extra little sharp points, they're poking and doing damage to the veins, the blood vessels, the body parts. That's why high blood sugar over a long period of time can cause health problems by those sugar molecules poking against the walls or the cells of body parts. And the smaller the cells, usually are the ones, the smaller the body cells of the body parts are the ones that get more damage. That's why you hear, or that's why diabetic patients wind up losing their eyesight, because there are very small blood vessels there. Sharp objects poking those small vessels do damage. That's why diabetic patients are at high risk of sores that don't heal on the toes and feet and lead to amputation, because the further from the heart, or most distant parts of the body, are in the toes and feet, the smallest vessels. And so those small vessels, if they get damaged by the high blood sugars, they're more susceptible to injury and damage from getting blisters, stubbing your toe, ingrown toenails, all those little things that in normal, we think of, oh, no big deal, it'll heal. Well, for the diabetes patient, those things don't heal very well. So high blood sugars cause damage. And that's two examples, but other examples are the small vessels to different organs, but primarily sight and the distal extremities, toes and feet. And so there's the problem with high blood sugars in diabetes patients. Okay, so again, type 2 diabetes patients, they're making insulin, their pancreas is making insulin. Uh, However, the body's just not using it well enough. And side note, type 2 diabetes patients actually can improve their uh, uh, utilization or efficiency using this blood sugar by exercise, by eating better foods, less carbohydrates. You still need them to function and live, but not so much the heavy sugars without activity. Now, I mentioned that most people think, well, high blood sugar, that means too many sweets, can't eat cookies, candy, cakes, all that. It's kind of right. There are that's cookies, candy, sweets, refined sugar. Yeah, that's putting sugar in your blood system. But those sugars, they don't have any vitamins or minerals, those other things that help keep us healthy. But it's carbohydrates, just like eating an apple. An apple has roughly average size apple has 15 carbohydrates in it. Uh, a cookie, two cookies, small chocolate chip cookies, let's give an example, have roughly 20 to 30 uh, grams of carbohydrates in it. So, do I eat two cookies or do I eat an apple? They both have the same amount of carbohydrates or sugars, but obviously the apple has vitamins and minerals. The cookies, it's a bunch of homemade, man-made stuff primarily, except for the chocolate, and of course there's flour. Those things, if you really want to break it down. But just because a person has diabetes doesn't mean they can't have cookies, cakes, sweets, or pies. And I'll get into the details later on some of that. But for the most part, for everything a human needs to function, brain function, breathing, opening your eyes, sitting, standing, digestion, everything requires carbohydrates or sugar in the blood for those functions to take place. So everybody has glucose or sugar in their blood necessary for life. However, you need insulin to break down and transfer that glucose from the blood system, the circulation, into the cells and organs to be used. Repeating myself, but type 1 has no insulin to transport this blood sugar, the sugar in the blood, into the cells, into the body parts for function. So insulin's needed. Now, high levels of glucose and the blood sugar cause problems like I mentioned. It's kind of like having too much in the fuel tank. Your fuel tank overspills or spills over and causes, problems. You got a mess of fuel on the ground or on your car, overfilling the tank. Same thing, you overfill the blood system, the circulation system, you've got a mess. It causes damage. Now, just a brief topic, the National Dietary, NDA, National Dietetics Association, states that our diet, human diet, is supposed to be 40 to 65% of carbohydrates. So meaning, normal human being, for us to function and live, we need to have our meals to include roughly 65% of carbohydrates. Again, we need sugar for energy. Now, extra glucose or carbohydrates in the blood, believe it or not, is converted to fat. So, why are most patients who have type 2 diabetes overweight? Because extra carbohydrates in the blood sugar in a type 2 diabetic, when they're not being transported into the blood system, into the cells, those carbohydrates, not only is your liver storing carbohydrates or the muscles, but that extra glucose in the blood is converted to fat. Now, uh, finally, another big important aspect of this liver holding glucose or holding sugar to be used is because, uh, for every human being, roughly, I say roughly, between 2 o'clock in the morning and 8 o'clock in the morning, those are the time frames that most people are sleeping. Well, did you ever wonder why you actually start to wake up? Okay, some people might not uh, wake up by 8 o'clock. Some might be early. But your body, the computer system in your brain, says that, okay, somewhere between 2 o'clock and 8 o'clock, we need to wake up. It's time to get up and start activity. Your brain, your heart, the muscles in your body require blood sugar to wake you up. And this is called the dawn phenomenon. Okay, and so there's another piece of trivia for you right now. Your brain signals that, hey, we need to start getting up. Well, you didn't just take in a bunch of glucose for energy to wake you up. You didn't just have a meal. Your brain tells your liver, hey, let's get some sugar into the blood system to start charging up or start waking up our breathing, our eyesight, our alertness to wake up. Your body requires blood sugar for those cells, those body parts to wake you up. The dawn phenomenon. And that's your brain telling your liver, hey, dump some of that extra blood sugar into the system. And let's get let's get our body to wake up. Now, a person who produces insulin is using that blood sugar that just got dumped in by the liver, by your liver. Someone who has insulin is able to use that blood sugar to wake up, to start breathing a little bit more rapidly, to become aware. Type 1 diabetes patient who does not have insulin requires insulin for utilizing this purpose. So for type 1 diabetic, early in the morning, blood sugars are naturally going to be higher. The liver dumped sugar in there for me to wake up. However, if I don't have enough insulin, my blood sugar is going to go up. So there's just one little note enough about how important carbohydrates, blood sugars are, and insulin. I have to give this type of information so that there's more of a full understanding of type 1 diabetes and how type 1 diabetics have to adjust life and all the things that go into living with this. So the next information is going to be a little bit more about not so much physiology, but types of insulin and how everything interacts. And yes, I'll talk about carbohydrates and foods, how you balance that. Exercise burns carbohydrates as well. So many different things. It's kind of like you have to be a extreme computer yourself to manage type 1 diabetes. The truth of it, the reality. And once you're diagnosed with it, you are sentenced to life because You have to do all of this just simply to stay alive. That's the sentence to it. Okay, so look forward to the next videos. Hopefully this information is really helpful to you. And yes, we'll get into what goes on during the day for me and what's the reality.